Alright, so this is our Roman Scutum shield. Let me just show you through some of the basics and the materials we used. Okay, so the first thing we need to consider is the core material used. In this case, we've got a few pieces of MDF wood that have been used to create this particular curve, and that is the basic structure of it. Inside here, we have a dog bowl. The handle is a piece of wood that has been carved into shape, and this is held on to here with 6 screws going to the back. We've got a leather strap. You have to be using particularly thick leather or double up leather, otherwise it will break. And you have to secure that leather onto the wood with nylon string or paracord. Anything thinner and it will break. I've also used a few pieces of string over here just in case one of those threads goes. So then, with regards to the padding of our shield, you'll notice that the edges are quite thoroughly padded. There is a layering to the padding on the interior. It is pool noodle followed by dog blanket. Sorry, let me start that again. On the interior, it is hose pipe followed by dog blanket followed by pool noodle. This is so it is nice and firmly padded, and also it won't bite through the pool noodle over time. Now you'll notice that this is covered in fake leather. The fake leather or vinyl is pretty much going to ensure that the shield lasts a long period of time and is relatively waterproof. As I mentioned, it is made with an interior of MDF wood, and that can't get wet. Don't wet that. It's not good. Alright, so once I've made that I got the basic shape, I got the padding around the edges, and then I covered it in vinyl. Before covering in vinyl, you'll notice this is a little bit squishy. This is also a layer of dog blanket over here. The padding over here, so it's not just a solid dog bowl. I've used camping mat foam over here, and I've covered the dog bowl in camping mat foam additionally. And then of course everything is secured over with that layer of vinyl or fake leather using a combination of staple gun and contact adhesive glue. Now a lot of the painting and the finishing touches, that is mostly aesthetic, so don't worry about that. I think the most important thing is to remember when making a shield like this, you want your handle to be nice and secure and sturdy and solid. You want that padding on the outside to be good, because that way you're allowed to charge. If you have an unpadded shield, you're not allowed to charge with it, so that takes away a lot of its advantages. I like to have this layer of dog blanket underneath that adds to the padding, and then of course you end up with a very nice Roman Scutum shield. Alright, so in the following video I'm just going to take you through how I made this particular shield so you guys can make it yourselves.
Alright, so the first thing I start off with is I cut 2 layers of MDF wood. Now if you don't want to cut and laminate 2 pieces of MDF wood, you can use plywood. Just a word of advice with plywood: with the curving technique I'm using, the plywood would have curved unequally. You need to have a shield press to curve plywood successfully. I don't have a shield press. This is a backyard way of making a nice solidly curved Scutum. Now also another thing to point out, so with regards to the size of my Roman shield, my Scrutum shield, historical sources say they are 4 feet tall and 2.5 feet wide. Convert that into real world measurements, and that's about 76 centimeters wide and about 120 centimeters tall. You'll also notice I'm not going with a pure imperial Scrutum shield design. The edges of my rectangle are curved. The reason is just simply so I can have an easier time trying to pad the edges of the shield. Padding around sharp corners is a bit of a mission. You'll also notice there I've got a 3rd layer of MDF just in the center, and that is just to compensate for that weak point I have in my shield where the hand grip is. Now you also notice what I'm doing here is I've put a bit of pool noodle along the edges of the shield, and I'm tightening it with rope. And you're going to see I'm going to be tightening that more and more and more, and that is basically going to give that curve to my shield. The reason I have that pool noodle on the edges just so the rope doesn't end up chewing through the MDF. That can really suck. Okay, and then once I've got a nice curve to the shield, I'll be showing you a little bit later on how I glue it and rivet it together. But for the meantime, I'm getting that solid curve that you'd get with a Roman Scutum shield. And dipped it in the swimming pool. You can hose it down, any sort of wetness really. Keep it nice and solidly strapped like that, and leave it out to dry in the sun. As I said, this doesn't work with plywood. This technique does not work with plywood. You need to get a shield press for plywood, because plywood bends unequally. Now the next step I'm going to go to is I really like to cover my Dahoga shields entirely with fake leather or vinyl. The reason for this is it gives it a marginal amount of water weatherproofing, and also it's just going to protect your shield from the damage of battle. You don't want that foam to disintegrate. You don't want that wood to get the wood backing to get damaged. So I like to cover it with a little bit of this fake leather. It looks cool. It serves a purpose. It protects your shield from rain and the elements and the faces of your opponents. And then the next thing I do is I really like to use what you could call like dog blanket. You can buy it at any hardware store. I call it dog blanket because that's where I've seen it used before, but it's basically a really cheap blanket made out of shredded blankets. When you're trying to cover the entire surface area of a shield, other than those weak points where you want to pad with foam, this is a much cheaper and easier to use alternative, so you can really bash into your opponents quite nicely without sending them to hospital. Now you see, after my shield has dried, I gave it a good 24 hours. I got that natural curve over there, but because the universe is against me, it didn't absolutely curve exactly to the millimeters. You'll see the one is slightly more curved than the others, and that is where crap tons of glue and rivets come in place. Now please be liberal with your wood glue. You want that to be nice and glued in there. And then what I do is, whilst that glue is setting, I rebind it. Now just something to point out, if you're making a shield with an arm strap as opposed to a boss hand grip, this is way too curved. But that's how the Romans did it. That's why the Romans didn't have arm strap shields. For greater body protection, they would increase the curve of those Scutum shields. Of course, the only drawback of that is you can't have an arm strap grip. You end up having a boss grip, but different shields for different waves. Then what I do here is I rivet the hell out of the shield, and that is just going to make sure that it all sticks together and holds itself quite nicely. There is the foundations of my Scutum shield if you want to have a good look. Okay, then this is, you don't have to do this. This is entirely optional. This is just because some of my old shields, I noticed when I took apart, had a bit of mold damage. I got a little bit of linseed oil and I oiled it up. Well, that's entirely optional. And the next thing is I went and bought a dog bowl, and I bent it to shape. Bending the dog bowl to shape was a bit of a mission, but eventually I got it to the right curve, and I used nylon string to basically tie that dog bowl to the front of the shield there. It's not a pretty solution. And there you can see with the string all over the place, it's really not a pretty solution, but that's all going to get covered up with foam and glue and vinyl, so you're not going to see it's not a pretty solution. Okay, so then the next thing I do is, so I skimmed through that very quickly there. Unfortunately, my phone went flat when I was videoing this. You'll notice I've got hose pipe all the way around the edge of the shield, and what that hose pipe is going to do is it's just going to stop my shield from biting through the foam padding. Now also, when doing that vinyl cover, I always do the interior first, and the reason being, you'll see it towards the end of the video. Just glue the interior first, just not the edges of the interior, just the inside. And that's just it's a bit of a show what it is starting to look like. It's slowly getting there. Now the next thing I make is I cut that wooden handle. I want to make sure that that curvature over there that I'm trying to get, so first with the jigsaw and then a little bit later with some sandpaper, is just so that when I glue and then screw that into the shield, it actually fits smoothly. And then I did a little bit of elbow grease work with a file to give it to that sexy hand grip. And once again, I oiled it a bit just to give that nice oiled wood look because it looks sexy. And then also it will mean it will last a long time. I make my shields to last years, guys. Okay. Now the first thing I do is I use a little bit of contact adhesive, gluing both the wood and then the shield surface, let that dry a bit, and then I'll attach it very carefully. The glue is not going to hold the handle onto the shield. It's just to position it whilst I get to the next step, which is drilling into it. So I used quite, I think I used like 4 or maybe 6 screws into there, so it's nice and firmly in there. I never want to have to replace that handle. The next thing I do is I attach a leather strap. This is just useful for carrying it. Now you see I've got that dog blanket on that I kept speaking about. So you notice the edges of the shield. You got the first layer of hose pipe, second layer of dog blanket, and then there'll be a third layer of pool noodle, which I'll add a little bit later. So this is an affordable way to get your shields nicely and safely padded. So there you'll see me. I'm busy attaching my pool noodle. The tape, as you see, is just to hold it there whilst I get the glue and the covering in place. And then as a final step, I figure out where I need to glue that exterior or that front layer on. Now, just for aesthetic, I really want to glue it down quite nicely on other sides of that foam. So you see I'm placing a lot of contact adhesive very liberally just to that little crack between the blanket edge and that pool noodle edge. And then I am going to same very liberal amount of glue going over there. When making shields like this, I find I go through quite a lot of that contact adhesive. Make sure you work in a well ventilated area, boys and girls, because that contact adhesive in a closed area gives you one hell of a headache and the world stops making sense. It's deeply unpleasant. So then I've glued that. That's all ready. And I don't know why I was walking around in a circle over there. And basically, when I get back to the shield, I am going to put it over like that. And you see that nice red, you know, Caesar's legionaries. Oh, I love that red. And I'll start pressing and gluing that down. And of course, I have my trusty staple gun just to get it in there nice and neat. I actually ended up stapling solidly all the way around, just to give that nice tightness. I like that finishing touch in my shields. It looks sexy. Now you'll see I'll start bending it in on the other side there. I've got, in this case, I'm just using staples. I'm not using contact adhesive. I'm trying to pull the edge of that vinyl over the padding on the inside of the shield and get that as firmly in there as possible. Once again, I used a lot of staples for this. Because you don't want that tearing. It's a bloody mission to tear. And also in this case I measured it just ever so slightly too short for the actual mass of the shield, and that's basically the finished once I've stapled down the exterior padding. So that gives you that lovely firm padded edge over there, and that is the nice red of the shield. So that is I'm going to be padding the boss just now. But it's on their way for a nice full combat shield. Doing the last little bit touches of gluing over here because I don't want my vinyl to be flapping all over the place because it doesn't look neat. I wanted this shield to look neat. And I press that down nice and solid. Now I'm not doing something correctly here. I'm just applying the vinyl onto the wet glue. Normally you'd wait for 2 layers of glue to dry before sticking them together. Okay, so now this is padding with the boss of the shield. So I've got the larger layer of leather that goes, not leather. So in this case I use camping mat foam, which is a closed cell foam. I bought it from a Sportsman's Warehouse. It lasts me a long time. I use it for basically everything. And you really want to pad that boss nicely because you're going to be running into people with this, and if your shield is not fully padded, you can't use it for charge combat, and that really sucks. Okay, so then once I cut that out, that's just the decoration. This is more of an aesthetic level to cover that padding over there like that. And once again I cut out some vinyl just to cover that, once again to protect the foam, and then also because it gives that trademark Roman Scutum shield look. And yeah, pretty much that's a step-by-step talk through of how I made the shield. And I'm quite happy with it. It weighs a bit, you know, your larger shields do weigh a bit. It's beautifully padded. It'll last a hell of a long time. As I said, the only variation in materials that you would really go for is sometimes instead of pool noodle around the edges, you can use insulation pipe. It's a little bit thinner. I didn't have insulation pipe at the time, but you know, potato, tomato, same thing. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, is the core of the shield. You can use, I forget the word again. You can use plywood, yeah, that's the word, but you need a shield press. So this particular shield would be a larger shield. It gives you full body protection. In this combat, it particularly favors protection of the torso and the legs. You want to move, you'll be able to move around with it quite nicely, protecting your full body. And then, of course, with regards to the measurement of a Scrutum shield, you know it's the right size if it's covering just above your knees and up to your neck. And as you can see, that gives you some pretty decent protection against spears and arrows or close combat fighting. So, long live the Empire!